Hi, Gaye DeRusso with the Majestic rider here today on Blue Jay. Here to talk about some other things while I'm just riding him. So first I'm just going to talk about gaited horses. Many people think they're not different than regular horses, and they are. The people that really truly do not understand them or have not worked with enough of them may think that they're the same. But they move differently. They will act differently, and some have a lot of looseness or laxity in their joints compared to regular horses and even compared to some other gaited horses. There's different kinds of gaited horses, and I'm not talking about the breeds, but I'm talking about the ones that just gait, or the ones that will pace and can gait, or the ones that trot and gait. And some do all three: trot, pace, gait. And so that makes them move differently, and it will make them act differently as they're moving around. There's the gene that they can test to see if the horse is gaited or not. And depending on how many genes it has, it will be more naturally gaited. He wasn't paying attention there. So if it has 2 copies of the gene, it's going to usually be easier to gait versus it just has 1 copy of the gene. You have to know that they're all different. Lots of people will say they're not. And when I talk about inversion or rounding the horse and doing these things that are odd to the horse to help him to gait naturally, because I don't use heavy shoes or long feet or anything like that, they don't understand or they don't think it's true. And that's usually because they haven't had a pacey one, or they haven't had a trotty one, or they haven't had one that was extremely difficult to gait. But I have. Most of the horses that come in for training with me are not very well bred, or they have not had very good training over the years, and so they can be extremely difficult to get them to gait. And so over the years I've learned all these different things to do to help them to gait, and so that's what I'm sharing with you. And you don't have to do any of these things, or you can do all of these things. These are just things I have learned. Now, I came from hunter jumper and from dressage, and I didn't believe it as well when I started off. I just wanted to ride these horses in a snaffle, in my English saddle, my English jumping saddle. And then over the years, you find out things that work better. I found that some of these horses go fine in a snaffle, and some don't. And that's the hard part, is to accept some of the things. The snaffle puts a lot of pressure on their tongue, and as it bends, some of these horses, it will hit their palate, and they have a lower palate, so they don't like it. And they just tend to go a little bit better in the shank bit, some of them, not all of them. And the stronger ones, yes, you can re-educate them with the snaffle, but some of them have such a big engine on them that it can be very dangerous riding them out there in a snaffle. Okay, because you might not have enough power brakes. It's like driving a Lamborghini with Honda brakes, a Honda Accord brakes. It might just not work out so well in the end. So you learn things as you go, and we learn more and more every year about gaited horses with the research and all of that, but they are different. So other things about them is some of them are very sensitive to anesthesia, and when you give them just a little bit, especially the walk-in horses tend to be more lightweight, they can almost fall over, or they can't stand up, and then everybody thinks something's wrong with them. I'm like, yes, it's called they're a lightweight. So with gaited horses, it's always best to start with less dosage of anesthesia and medications and see how they do. When they move, some of them are so lateral or towards the pacey side of the spectrum that they look lame all the time when they're walking. Now, you can make all those things better with training, but some of them are just born very, very lateral, and so they look very odd when they're moving. Okay? Due to this, as they go down trail and they're going over obstacles, the way they get over them will be different than the trotty ones, because since they're pacing at a walk, both the legs on the same side are coming off together. And if you don't care about the pace, you're like, I don't care, it's fine. If your horse doesn't trip or have problems being sure-footed, then it's not the best for them, but it's okay. But if you have a trippy one, you really want to go back and get them not to be so lateral, because the way that they move, when they trip, since two legs on the same side are going to be off the ground and moving together, it's very hard for them to catch themselves. So it's a big reason with the pacey horses to help them separate those legs and become a little bit more trotty if you can, to make them more sure-footed and safer. But they will move different. Some of these horses kind of move in two parts. So when you do things like your leg yield and your side pass and turn on the haunches, they have some difficulty doing it because of the way they move. That's the way that they're made to help them with gait. So that will take time to get used to, and you can help them, but a lot of times as you side pass, the front end will move and then the back end will move. And then you help them over time to do that better. But it is not natural for many of them to move their whole body over together, as it might be more with like a quarter horse that's stiffer. These guys are very lanky, some of them, especially the walking horses or any of the ones that have walking horse bred into it, which they might. If you have a horse that's not papered, it might. Other things to know about them is, again, some of them are so loose in their joints, they're hyper flexible. And when they stand, they can stand with all their legs going a different direction. They can scratch their ear with you sitting up on top of them, which can be quite scary at times. You just can't believe the thing. You come up and all four legs are facing a different way. Now, again, I see that much more in the walking horse than the other breeds. They seem to be more hyper flexible because how they've been bred. But some of the other breeds can do it as well. Some of them will come down in their pasterns more than other horses. Now, some are fine, and some do have ligament disease, so you have to check. But some of them have been bred to be smoother by having longer pasterns and by coming down into those pasterns. So that's something to look at. How they're bred, we breed them so they have calm temperaments, which is great. So they can be calmer than regular horses like Arabs or thoroughbreds, but you still need to learn how to ride. If you don't know what to do and the horse doesn't know what to do, that's not a good match. But just know the gaited horses a lot of times do not have a lot of training on them. It's getting much better than it was years ago, but many still do not. And if they do have a lot of training on them, sometimes that's a non-gaited trainer who put all that training on, and so they don't always have the best gaits. See, there's ups and downs to having a gaited trainer or a non-gaited trainer. So they might put a great foundation on it, but you still might need help getting that horse's gaits. Some of the horses will gait really well, but they have no foundation. So a gaited trainer or person put those gaits on it and helped it, but they didn't put anything else on it. So you need to get help with that. So there's usually always more training to be done with the gaited horse to help that gaited horse understand what to do. Other things, some of them will come with very long feet. If they're long in the front, that's usually a pacey horse. If they're long in the back, that's usually a trotty horse. And that's what they did to get their gait. Some of these horses, that back end is so different that it can be lanky. And again, it makes it difficult for them to move sideways. Some of them, it's difficult to move backwards. Some of those walking horses are the ones with the kind of walking horse back end, again, in case it was bred into one of the other breeds. They tend to slide their feet more than pick them up. That's what makes those walking horses so smooth. But it can also make them slide on rocks, slide on wet grass, slide in the mud, slide on granite, and roads. So you have to be aware of that, and you might have to put some traction devices on the back of their feet, just like caulks or something, or borium, just to help them not to slide if you're having problems with that horse sliding. When they back up or when they side pass, you might see on the ground after you've done it that there's drag marks because they're dragging their feet. And that's correct. Many of them do. So again, that's more the horses that are sliding the feet, like the walking horse, and the pacey ones, the ones not picking up their feet so well. Good boy. His stop is getting so much better. Good boy. Because they're wired differently, and some of them are so calm when they trip, if they're a little spooky, jumpy, or energetic, they'll usually catch themselves pretty quick, even if it's a pacey one. But if it's a very calm one, some of them don't catch themselves. They just don't react that fast when they trip, and they can fall down, especially if you fall forward and knock them off their feet. So that's something to know. So any pacey horse, I'm always working them over the poles, helping them not to trip and to get more on the trotty side, because it will make them more sure-footed and gives them a lot more options versus they're just towards the pace. So if you're getting into gaited horses, you have to know there's a lot to do. There's a lot to learn, and I always recommend take lessons first, learn how to ride first, and then learn how to ride gaited. Because if you have to learn how to ride and how to ride gaited at the same time, it can be very overwhelming. Because you have to have good feel and timing to know when the horses are gaiting correctly and when they're not. And you can only build feel and timing by riding horses a fair amount. It's very easy to feel a walk. If you can't feel a walk, we're in trouble. You got a lot of work ahead of you, but it's doable. But you can usually feel a walk and a trot, because the trot becomes very bouncy and it bounces you out of the saddle usually. But when they're doing different things underneath you and you've never felt them before, you don't know it's correct or not, many of the people will let the gaited horses do that. And before you know it, the gaited horse is either trotting or pacing, or it's changing its gait every 3 steps because you're not telling it what to do. And so it's not staying the same speed, and it's not keeping the same footfall. So you have to learn those things. For them to gait well, they should at least have 1 foot on the ground at all times. And if they're very smooth, they usually have more feet on the ground at the same time. So to do that, you cannot pace or trot, because that's a 2-beat gait, both of those, with suspension. So they don't always have 1 foot on the ground. That's why there's a bounce, and it won't be as smooth. So again, you should try to learn to ride first before you get gaited. These horses are great, and some are very sure-footed, and some are not so sure-footed. So when you're buying one, you need to figure out what terrain you're going to ride on and how sure-footed that horse is for you. If you're going to ride in very steep areas and not doing a lot of gaiting, I would get one with a shorter stride, and I'd get one that lifted its knees up pretty good, or more on the trotty side, because they're going to be more sure-footed for you. If you're going to ride on rolling hills and steep sometime, but not all the time, and do a fair amount of gaiting, then one that gaits all the time, or one that's a little pacey, and you're going to work on it or help it, can be very smooth for you. And the trotty ones sometimes, not all of them, but some of them can be a little choppier or harder to get in gait. It just depends on the horse. But that's why there's so much to know, and nobody tells you, right? And, the big thing that happened to me when I got into gaiting is nobody talked about tripping. I think I was pretty much the only one. And I would talk to other trainers and say other things like, boy, are these horses trippy compared to the thoroughbreds and warm bloods I used to ride. And they're like, yeah, don't tell anybody that. I'm like, what? They're like, don't tell them, they won't buy them. I was like, how about you tell them and tell them what to do to help the horse instead of hiding it. So when you're buying those horses online, they're going to edit out if that horse tripped in that video. If you don't know that, that's what they do. So if it tripped or something, it will. But you got to know that, and that's why it's best to always ride them and ride them in terrain similar into what you're going to ride, so you know if it's a trippy one or not. And if you have poor balance or you're older, you do not want a trippy gaited horse. It might be calm, but that will be dangerous for you. So it's dangerous enough to ride horses. And young horses can be trippy because they're learning, so you have to know that too. If you're older or you have poor balance and you're going to buy a young one, it might be a little trippy. It may grow out of it and be totally fine, but just know that. The other thing, because of how these horses are bred, and many are sickle-hocked or cow-hocked, which helps their gait and helps them so they don't step on their front feet and forge, it also can cause them to have some stifle issues. Now, some of these horses will grow out of the stifle issue. It's just a young thing, and it's similar to our kneecap. So just think, when you were a kid, did you have any kneecap problems? A lot of girls did, because we have wider hips, and then we kind of came in, and so had kneecap problems. But it got better over time, usually. So that can happen with the young horses too, as they get stronger and they grow out of it, or you rehab them and they do well. But some, those stifles are so loose because they're breeding it for overreach with like the walking horses. And so some of them, it's always a problem if they're not conditioned. If they get weak, those stifles start to lock up, slip out more, and they have problems. And I have videos on stifle if you have a horse with stifle problems. There's many things you can do to fix it, but just know gaited horses tend to have more stifle problems. I don't see them as much with navicular and things like that. They can get hock arthritis, especially, if it's one that they've been doing a lot of backups on or working with the cows. But they otherwise are usually pretty tough animals and very stoic. So you have to keep an eye on them and just know your horse well, so if anything changes, you're highly aware of it. Other things to know: saddle fit. These horses are not going into a trot, so the way you fit them with the saddle means you have to make sure that they're very comfortable in a walk, that they can use their shoulders well, and that the saddle's not pinching it or pushing down on their wither or pushing down on the middle of their spine, and it's not bridging on their spine. So you want to check their back daily, because young horses change, and you might need to get your saddle refitted every 6 months on a young horse until it's done growing. But if the saddle doesn't fit, because everybody's always like, oh, I'm getting a new horse, will it fit my saddle? And I'm like, I don't know. But if your saddle doesn't fit and it's improper and pinching on that horse, to the gaited horse, it does many things. So one, they won't gait. They'll either just start trotting or pacing just because your saddle's pushing on them and they're in pain and they're trying to avoid that pain. Two, it can make them trip. It can make them trip and fall down because it's pushing on, if it's pushing on their neck or their wither area, and then that controls the nerves that go down their front legs. If they can't feel their front legs, guess what's going to happen? They're going to trip. So it's very important that you get a properly fitting saddle for that horse, okay? And you get it checked, and you check their back. Every couple of weeks, you just run your hand on their back. I'm sure there's videos on that, or I can make a video if I don't have one. And you make sure that that horse is not getting sore, because it can cause a lot of problems. So gaiting and tripping can be caused by bad saddle fit. Also, if the horse won't go downhill, that's also usually a saddle fitting problem, or if the horse is bucking or rearing, can be. Okay? Now, what else is weird about gaited horses that I learned all the time? Well, English saddles aren't the funnest thing to ride them in. A deep dressage saddle is fine. Western saddles are fine. Mine's kind of in between. This is Crest Ridge. And I like close contact because you want to be able to feel the gait. So if you're too far off of their back, you might not feel the movement underneath you as much. And if your saddle fits but you can't feel the movement, you might want to ride them in a bareback pad in like an arena or a round pen till you get the feel of the gait. But you have to be able to feel what's underneath them, and you have to keep your body balanced. I have videos on this with body position, but when a horse is, say, pacey, it helps if you tilt a little forward because you lighten your seat, and it helps them usually to want to drive and reach up more with their back end. But if it's a trippy one, you got to be careful with that. Then I usually won't tilt forward. But otherwise, on the pacey ones, you can tilt forward, and you want to ride with a little lower headset, a rounder frame. But again, each horse is different. So some need to be like this because they get too tense when you round them. And some you can't let them bring their head too low if they're pacey because they get very heavy on that front end, and then they can fall down. So you have to find out where can he go, where he's not trippy, where he's gaiting well, and then that's the head position. You want to teach the horse and to relax that back because tension will make the pacey horses pace. Trotty horses are the opposite. So trotty horses, you don't want to frame up too much. It will make them trot more, okay, because it separates those legs more. You usually have to ride the trotty ones with a higher headset, not lower. So higher, a little inversion in their back, so they tense up the muscles, and that will cause them to swing their legs and go more lateral. And then the person usually has to sit back more and keep more weight on the back end. So that's usually when you see someone in a chair seat, what they're doing. You, as a rider, need to be able to go back and forth between those two things, because if you have a horse that paces and trots, you have to change when that horse starts changing to counteract it and get them back in gait. It's very important you learn what a half halt is, because that's going to control your speed and your gait, and you have to learn how to keep a horse going the same speed, because the hardest part with gaited is you'll get the gait, then they'll go faster or slower and fall out of the gait. So you have to learn how to use your legs and your half halt and your seat to keep that horse going in the gait. That can be quite hard. In a trot, you can tell, because it's either bouncier or not as bouncy, but in the gaited horses, it might not be bouncy at all. It might be perfectly fine, so you don't even know you're changing a speed. They move their head up and down at the flat walk, the running walk, and the foxtrot, so that's not a lameness thing. That's just them using their head and neck to help them to gait. Many of them will, we're going to go faster, buddy, will click their teeth and flop their ears if they really get into the rhythm, so that's nothing wrong either. Now, some of the gaited horses have been abused over the years, and so you might get one that's very fearful. Same thing, you need to be able to, if you're buying it online, make sure that's not a fearful horse and you can handle it. Because any of the horses that have been abused or very fearful, you can make them better, but sometimes it's ingrained and they will never forget what was done with them over the years. So they might always be afraid of men. A lot of them are afraid of men. They might be afraid of sticks, so you might have to really get them used to walking sticks and things of that nature, because it's usually somebody hit them with them. Some are even afraid of hats because somebody smacked them in the head with a hat, like a baseball cap. So each horse is different, but you just have to know that it's possible that the horse has some fear in it that's been abused, okay? Just because of the way, I guess, they're trained in some areas. And that can happen with any kind of breed of horse. It's just, I've seen it much more in the gaited breeds, again, compared to hunter, jumper, and dressage horses that I've trained, did not have as many fear issues. So a lot of desensitizing, learning all that groundwork will help your horse. You have to get a feel of the gaits, and I have a video of this with me on a yoga ball explaining what it feels like to be able to ride it, because again, you can feel when it's a trot, but can you feel when it's a flat walk versus a running walk? because they're both a walk, it's just a faster speed. So what I'm doing as he's going is every time he starts going past his running walk, which is not very fast right now because I don't think he was ridden at a running walk before, he starts changing his footfall, and I have to catch that half halt and kind of push him over to help him. So basic dressage helps the gaited horses a lot, so if you don't know any, you should learn that. But you have to be able to feel what the gaits feel like for you to be able to ride them well. Okay? The basic dressage will help you a lot with the gaited horses because many of the exercises with dressage, which is just basic training, in case you don't know what dressage is, that's what it means. See, he just tripped. So, and the shoulder in, the circles, and the leg yield is going to help you a lot to keep your horse in gait, especially if it's pacey. The other thing you should know is that the gaited horses are really good at telling you how your arena footing is. And if there's any bumps underneath the dirt, they can trip on it, and they'll tell you that they keep tripping like over by the rug or by the gate because the footing is uneven there. Okay? So, because some of them don't lift their feet high, they kind of drag them, they'll hit those things with their toes. So you might have to do some things to help them get more clearance with their legs if they keep tripping. Pole work helps a lot, makes them stronger, makes the muscles around the shoulders stronger and their back, helps their top line. But also you might have to do some things with shoeing or barefoot trimming to help you, like a Mustang roll, or with a shoe, roll the toe, rocker the shoe, or a square shoe to help their feet get out of the way. You also want to know if you're getting a gaited horse and nobody else has a gaited horse at the barn, that they may make fun of you. They won't understand why you have one. And if you got a big walking horse that's very lanky, they're going to tell you it's lame and neurological. Because that's what happens, because the walking horse has so many things that in a regular horse is considered neurologic. Okay? But they're bred that way so they can overreach and do their gait. So you have to know that, because if you're not someone who will stand up for your horse, or you're uneducated about gaited horses, you're going to start believing what they say, and you're going to think the seller sold you some lame, neurologic horse, and then you're going to put it down, because I've seen that done over and over again, especially with vets that are not used to gaited horses, think something's wrong, and many will test for EPM, but know that many of these horses, because they're coming from the Midwest, will test positive for EPM. It does not mean they have it, okay? It doesn't mean they have the symptoms. It's just in their system, and they may never have a problem with it. So if you follow that path and you're testing for EPM, get a spinal, see if it's in the spinal fluid, and find out for real if your horse has EPM or not, because it could be a different problem. And many things can be helped or fixed, but only if you find out the right diagnosis. So you want to be educated on them because it will help you. So you don't want to take a nice Tennessee walking horse with a big overstride that's fun to ride, and you don't understand anything, and you ride it incorrectly, so it stops gaiting and starts pacing, and then it gets really lazy because you're not riding it with enough energy and it becomes trippy, then you call the vet. But the only real reason it's doing those things is it's not being ridden correctly or hard enough. Now, this is not all horses. Of course, there are horses that have issues. I can just tell you I've seen many that don't have the issues that were misdiagnosed. So it's always good to call a gaited trainer that does the breed of horse that you have, and that you understand what's going on, and you stick with someone who's really educated about them, not somebody who's seen one or two in their lifetime. I've talked to many vets when horses were being diagnosed with stuff, and when I called them out on it, they didn't have an answer for me. So here's one. So they're saying something's wrong with the horse, and I go, okay, how many Tennessee walking horses have you done a vet check on? 1. Well, I've trained thousands of them. So who do you think knows more about how they move? But if they won't listen to me, I can't change anything, okay? So there's certain weird things that some of these horses do, like the ringing of the hocks, the stifles, the tripping. How they move across the ground is different than regular horses. So they're wired that way so they can do it, but because of that, they will do some weird things at weird times. If you don't know how to ride them, again, they might change their gait 5 times in 5 steps, but it's the riding, okay? Because if they did it before and your saddle's been checked and all that, you usually need a trainer to help you to figure it out, but you need a gated trainer, and many of us do online lessons. Now, if you work with other trainers, which is fine because they can get you riding well and give you a basic foundation, it's best to ride these horses with 2 hands. Learn how to ride them with contact. You see my rein straight, but I'm trying to teach him how to do his running walk. You want to ride with a light contact. You don't want to over tuck them in. You ride with some semi-collection. And then in a neutral frame, once they can hold the gait, because we're trail riders, so we don't want to hang on them the whole time. So we're trying to get them to carry themselves and then stay in that gait. But you got to be able to do it with 2 hands before you go to 1. If you don't know how to ride and you're doing it with 1 hand, you can't half halt, you can't steer as well, and the horse is not going to feel it, and they're going to get confused. So learn how to ride with 2 hands before 1. If you're working with different trainers, and you can show them this video, you want to tell them if it's a natural horsemanship trainer, what I've usually seen with those trainers, again, this is not everybody because someone always complains, but they ride the gaited horses on too loose of a rein. Therefore, the horse keeps changing gaits, or if it's a walking horse, it can start wobbling all over the place. So you want to ride, even though they can teach you some of that stuff to start, in the end, when you go to gaiting, you want to ride them on a shorter rein like I am. If you're working with a dressage trainer, they tend to overframe them up so they kind of get too much arch in their neck, and then because they're trying to get impulsion or power from the back end, they're making the horse go past its speed of its gait, and they bunch it all up, and they teach the horse to pace in a very pretty frame, but it's not gaiting correctly. We don't want to ride a pace. That's not comfortable. We don't even want to ride a step pace if we don't have to. We want to ride the real gait. So with the dressage trainers, they need to ride with semi-collection, try to get that horse more neutral, try not to overframe it up, and they need to understand these horses don't move the same, so it's never going to feel like a warm blood or the other breeds that they're riding. It's going to feel different, and that's the way the horse is. Now, the other thing I see with dressage trainers, and don't get me wrong, they're great. They know a lot about rhythm and tempo, and all those things can help the gaited horse. But I see them trying to overly straighten these horses. These horses can be very wobbly. So yes, we want them to go in a straight line, but they start nagging at them and getting after them and getting really mean and yanking the reins is what I've seen, yanking the reins and spurring the horse hard, trying to get it to travel like a regular horse. It never will. It's never going to feel the same. It's always going to feel somewhat odd and different, and that's just the way they are. Okay? The hunter jumper people, they can get too far tilted forward because that's how we were taught, because we're going to jump like this, and that can help a pacey horse but make a trotty horse trottier. Okay? So a couple of things. Ride them with contact, but it's a light contact. Ride them with semi-collection. Don't over-collect them. Don't try to get too much impulsion out of them like a regular horse. We can get power, but it's going to feel different. And get the horses straight, but try not to overly straighten them. Okay. So that probably filled it up for now. That's a lot to take in. And I know I'm always trying to tell you everything I know about gaited horses, but just know it's a journey. It's a fun journey, but you got to be up for it. You got to want to learn for it to go the best. If you don't want to learn, you just want a smooth ride, or your husband or wife just going out with, the other one, then it's best just to find a gaited horse that you can try, so you make sure it gates well for you, and that you can gate it with however you're going to ride it if you're not going to take lessons. So if you're going to ride with one hand holding on the horn, that horse does that for you, and it does it sure-footed. That's usually an older gaited horse with mileage on it, experience, a calm one, and sure-footed. But you got to try them to know it for sure. And just know, again, it's good to check their feet, because if people have had their feet long, sometimes they have contracted heels or other issues, or they haven't been taken care of very well, and they have worms and all sorts of things that some of us are not used to seeing, because some of these horses have just been out in pasture. Oh, I forgot something else to tell you. So other things that run in the lines, because they've bred for color, and then they've bred for hardiness. So bred for color, this is more with the Rockies, they can have eye issues with the silver gene. Now, you can test for it, you can have their eyes checked, but you just have to know that some of these horses, and it's just like dogs, when you breed them for something specific, there's good and bad that comes out of it. So with the Rockies, always check their eyes. The Rockies and the Foxtrotters were bred to be very hardy animals, and they can pretty much live on air. They can live on hay that's not that great, not that much food, and they get by and hold their weight. Some of the other gaited breeds aren't so good at that. They're not so hardy. But due to that, a lot of people will not ride them enough, exercise them enough. They give them too much food, and then the horses come up with metabolic issues. So now I'm hearing like, oh, watch out for those breeds because they have metabolic issues. I'm like, how about watch out for those owners, because they're the ones who are affecting them. People bred them to be that way, and a lot of people don't know that. So you can't feed them as much as I might be able to feed a lanky walking horse, which I could feed all day long. Like my mare, she could eat all day long. But the other ones, like more his type and some of the other horses, you can't feed all day, or they'll get obese, and then they'll get metabolic problems. So realize they do have different things. They are great horses, but you have to put in some effort, know what you're doing, know what you're buying, and know that these horses do move differently. Lots of your friends are going to tell you your horse is lame. You're just like, thank you very much. Okay. You don't know gaited horses, so thank you for telling me what's wrong with it. and I've heard it for over 20 years. So just know you got to educate people. Let them see you get better and ride that horse well, and when they see that horse gaiting really well, they'll understand why it moves different. So don't fight with them, just move on, learn to be the best rider, make your horse the best, and then you'll enjoy these gaited breeds.